under her best friend's expert guidance. My wife finally divorced me. The day she slammed the door and walked out. My only real reaction was a sigh of relief. I finally had sole custody of the TV remote. It didn't take her long to realize that the guys sweet-talking her on the dating scene were all talk and no commitment. They wanted a free trial, not a subscription. But what truly broke her was discovering that her dear best friend, the very one who had coached her into signing the divorce papers, was currently marching over to my apartment with a hot tray of homemade lasagna. When Brooke slammed the divorce papers onto the dining table, I was deeply engrossed in a food delivery app, trying to decide on a new fried chicken combo. "Ted, sign it." I looked up at her, glanced down at the papers, and then looked back at my phone. "Hang on a second. This coupon expires in 3 minutes." Brooke's face flushed, shifting from a pale white to a deep, furious crimson. To be honest, I wasn't surprised we had reached this point. Her best friend Amber had a mouth that acted as a catalyst for disaster. Since last year, Amber had been practically living at our place, showing up every few days like she was reading from a script. "Babe, you deserve so much better. Ted is just a mid-level corporate drone. What kind of future do you have with him? There are plenty of wealthy single guys out there driving luxury SUVs, just waiting to treat you like a queen." At first, Brooke would defend me. But over time, her defenses grew quieter. Eventually, she stopped defending me altogether. And finally it led to this. I placed the order for the chicken pick, took the pen from the table, and flipped to the signature page. "How are we splitting things?" Brooke blinked, clearly caught off guard by how cooperative I was. "The house. My dad paid the down payment." "Fine. The house is yours." "The car? We bought it after we got married." "Take the car, too. I can bike to work. It's better for the environment anyway." Brooke's expression turned incredibly complex. She had probably rehearsed this moment 100 times in her head. She might have pictured me begging on my knees, crying, pleading for another chance. What she hadn't anticipated was me ordering takeout while signing away our marriage. That's it." I signed my name, slid the folder back to her, kept the pen. "What else do you want? Aren't you even going to try to save this?" I thought about it for a second. "If you can waive the delivery fee on my chicken, I might consider it." Brooke took a sharp, ragged breath. She snatched the papers, turned on her heel, and marched toward the door. Just before leaving, he looked back. Her eyes rimmed with red. "You're going to regret this, Ted." The front door slammed shut. The apartment suddenly felt empty. Truly, physically empty. Brooke had cleaned out all her clutter, her towering shoe racks, and her endless supply of skincare products. I sat down on the sofa, picked up the remote and pressed the power button. The sports channel flared to life. For 3 years, I hadn't been able to watch a single game without sitting through hours of mindless reality TV. First, the doorbell rang. Dinner was here. I opened the door, and the delivery guy handed me a steaming bag of fried chicken. Big meal for one man. I took the bag and smiled. Just got divorced, treating myself. His look of pity instantly morphed into pure envy. "Man, you are the happiest looking divorcee I've ever seen." He didn't get it. It wasn't just happiness. It was the feeling of a bird seeing the cage door open. After 3 years of confinement. Once I finished the chicken, I shot a text to Marcus. "It's done. Signed." 3 seconds later, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from him. "What do you mean done? She actually went through with it?" "Yeah. How are you holding up? Where are you? Are you okay, bro?" "I'm coming over right now. I just finished some fried chicken. Grab a 6-pack of beer on your way." A brief silence stretched over the line. "Are you sure you just got divorced and didn't win the lottery?" "Honestly, it feels about the same." Marcus hung up. 20 minutes later, he kicked open my door, carrying a case of IPA. First thing he did was look around the living room. "Damn, she really cleared the place out, huh?" "Yep." "The vanity desk? Gone. That massive shoe rack? Gone." Marcus's eyes lit up. "Your living room literally looks twice as big." He collapsed onto the sofa, the beer, and tossed it to me. "Bro, let me be real with you." "Go ahead." He began counting on his fingers. "First, no more handing over your paycheck to a shared account. Second, no more playing mind reader when she's mad. Third, no more getting kicked out of bed at 2 in the morning. Because she had a dream that you cheated on her." I choked on my beer. "How do you know more about my marriage than I do? Are you kidding? You called me at 3 in the morning, crying because she dreamed you were eating tacos with another girl. She made you sleep on the freezing living room floor. You forgot about that. Can we please strike that from the record?" Marcus took a slow sip of his beer. Never. I still have the voice memo of you crying. I play it whenever I have a bad day. It's better than therapy. I seriously considered dumping the rest of my beer on his head. But since he bought it, I let it slide. Around midnight, Marcus let out a soft burp and got unusually quiet. Seriously? Though what's the plan now? Living solo. What else? Just watch your back. Newly single guys are prime targets. Some women smell the freedom and pounce. I laughed. Pounce on what? I'm a mid-level IT guy making 90 grand a year. Who's targeting me? Marcus shook his head. Looking incredibly wise. You don't get it. Some women aren't looking at your bank account. At the time, I brushed it off. It wasn't until later that I realized. Marcus had actually been far too conservative with his warning. 3 days after the divorce. My life took a massive turn. Not for the worse, for the better. It was so good, I started wondering if I'd spent the last 3 years in a white-collar prison. First of all, my bank account didn't hit zero. At the end of the month when we were married, my paycheck would clear and a chunk went to Brooke's allowance. Then she'd want a new designer bag. Money transferred. Then she'd have brunch with her girls. Money transferred to cover her share. Yes, you read that right. I was covering her portion of those endless lunches with her friends. Now that money stayed right where it belonged. Looking at the balance, I felt a sensation I hadn't experienced in years. I had to search my vocabulary for the word wealthy. Second, I suddenly had an abundance of time. Our old weekends used to go like this. Morning shopping trips, afternoon movies. Dinner dates, followed by late-night drinks with her friends. And then I'd have to drive her friends home. Only to get grilled by Brooke. On why I dared to look at Amber through the rearview mirror. My new weekends looked like this. Sleeping in, playing video games. Ordering takeout, and playing more video games. Marcus warned me I was going to turn into a vegetable. Told him that being a vegetable was a luxury he couldn't comprehend. Just as I was settling into this peaceful routine, Amber reached out. Yes, Amber. The very same best friend. Who had spent years telling my wife to find herself. Aim higher, and know her worth. The architect of my divorce. She sent me a text. Hey Ted. I heard about you and Brooke. Are you holding up okay? I stared at the screen for 10 seconds. The sheer audacity was almost impressive. I replied, I'm fine, Amber. Make sure you're eating well. Takeout is terrible for your stomach. You should have some real food. Ted. Sure, Amber. Why don't you come over tomorrow? I'm making a batch of homemade lasagna. Ted. Got plans with Marcus. Amber, how about I drop some off at your place then? I hesitated. Free lasagna? Only an idiot turns down free lasagna, Ted. All right. The next afternoon, Amber showed up at my door holding a heavy boil-wrapped glass dish. Objectively speaking, Amber was attractive, slender. Nice style, always wore perfect makeup. But today she had definitely dialed it up. Her makeup was heavier. She was wearing a low-cut sundress. That left very little to the imagination. When she bent over to set the dish down on the kitchen counter. Well, let's just say I kept my eyes on the counter. Just put it on the table, I said. Grabbing a fork. Amber hovered by the entryway. Aren't you going to invite me to sit down? Oh, yeah. Come in. She stepped inside. Looking around the living room. You keep this place pretty clean for a bachelor. Fewer people mess. She smiled. Taking a seat on the couch. I dug into the lasagna. She watched me quietly. How is it? Really good. I made it with 3 types of cheese. Just the way you like it. I paused mid-chew. How did she know I liked 3-cheese lasagna? I'd only ever mentioned that to Brooke. I looked up. She was smiling sweetly. I shrugged and kept eating whatever. The lasagna was incredible. When I finished, Amber insisted on washing the dish. When she came out of the kitchen, her sleeves were rolled up and her hands were still slightly damp. Ted, you're almost out of dish soap. You need to replace it. Yeah. I'll grab some. I can bring some over next time I visit. Oh, sure. Thanks. Amber smiled again, this one lingering a bit longer. After she left, I texted Marcus. Amber just dropped off lasagna. 3 seconds later sent a flurry of texts. Are you an idiot? Why is she bringing you food? Have you lost your mind? You don't think that's incredibly shady? I replied, the lasagna was spectacular. Marcus, I hate you. I tossed my phone aside. Marcus was a good guy. But he was paranoid. Amber was probably just being nice. Checking in on her friend's ex out of basic human decency. Even when she posted a photo of the lasagna on Instagram. Later that evening with the caption Simple Joys. I didn't think much of it. People post photos of food all the time. I chose to believe in the basic goodness of people. For the first time in 3 years, Sunday morning did not begin with a lecture. There was no sighing from the other side of the bed, no sharp comments about how the sun was already up and how successful people were already at brunch. Ted woke up at 10:30. The apartment was cool, silent, and smelled faintly of nothing at all, a massive improvement over the overwhelming cloud of artificial lavender and expensive night creams that used to hang in the air like chemical warfare. He lay in bed for a solid 10 minutes, staring at the ceiling. He didn't have to jump up to make artisan coffee. He didn't have to drive across town to pick up organic sourdough. With a slow, deliberate stretch, Ted slid out of bed, pulled on a pair of faded gray sweatpants, and walked into the living room. It still looked incredibly spacious. Without Brooke's massive, gold-rimmed vanity desk blocking the natural light, the morning sun poured directly onto the hardwood floor, warming a perfect square patch right in front of the television. He picked up the remote, turned on the TV, and let the pre-game analysis of the afternoon match play in the background while he walked to the kitchen. His phone buzzed on the counter. Marcus, you alive? Or did the silence kill you? Ted, never been better. Just woke up. Marcus, it's almost 11. You degenerate. Want to grab beers later? Ted, can't. Amber is coming over. The typing bubbles appeared instantly, disappeared, appeared again, and then his phone started ringing. Ted answered it, putting it on speaker as he poured himself a glass of cold water. Are you actively trying to ruin your life, or is this a subconscious cry for help? Marcus's voice boomed through the speaker. She's bringing food, Marcus. Do you know how expensive groceries are right now? Ted, she's not bringing you food out of the charity of her heart. She's laying ground bait. You're a fish, and she's tossing little bits of bread into the water so you get comfortable before she pulls out the net. Ted took a sip of water. It's lasagna. With 3 types of cheese. She even baked the top layer so it's crispy around the edges. I don't care if it's got gold flakes on it, Marcus groaned. Think about the logistics here. Amber spent the last 12 months convincing Brooke that you were a low-achieving anchor dragging her down into the depths of middle class mediocrity. She practically wrote the divorce papers herself. And now, 3 days after the ink is dry, she's in your kitchen washing your dishes? It doesn't make sense. Maybe she realized Brooke was the problem, Ted said mildly. Or maybe she realized that a quiet, low-drama IT guy making 90 grand with zero debt and a clean apartment is actually a rare commodity in a city full of guys who rent sports cars to take photos for their dating profiles, Marcus countered. Just keep your guard up. Don't let her leave anything at your place. Once they leave a hair tie, it's over. I don't even have enough hair for a hair tie, Ted said. You know what I mean. Call me when she leaves. If you don't call me by 6, I'm calling the police to report a domestic kidnapping. Ted hung up with a chuckle. He didn't think Amber was that calculating. Sure. She was loud, opinionated, and had a habit of talking over people, but she'd always been relatively polite to him when Brooke wasn't looking. Maybe she just felt guilty for her role in the divorce. He looked at his bank account app. After paying his half of the rent, which was now his full rent, though he was planning to move to a smaller, cheaper place. When the lease was up, he still had a staggering amount of disposable income. For 3 years, his salary had been treated as our money, while Brooke's salary from her boutique marketing job was her money. He calculated his monthly expenses without the weekly dinners at restaurants, where the portions were microscopic and the prices astronomical, without the constant Uber rides because Brooke's shoes were too painful to walk in, and without the random subscription boxes that accumulated in the hallway. He was actually saving over $2,000 a month. He felt a strange, light sensation in his chest. It was the absence of weight. At exactly 1 in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. Ted opened the door to find Amber standing there, holding a beautiful, ceramic baking dish wrapped in a thick, red checkered kitchen towel. She was wearing a soft beige knit sweater that fell casually off one shoulder, fitted blue jeans, and ankle boots. Her hair was styled in loose, effortless waves, and she smelled of vanilla and warm sugar. Hey, Ted, she said, her voice dropping to a soft, warm register that he had never heard her use when Brooke was around. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. Not at all. Just watching the pre-game, Ted said, stepping back to let her in. Smells amazing. It's still hot, she said, walking past him into the kitchen. She set the dish down on the counter and began unpacking it. I brought some garlic bread too. I know you like it extra garlicky, so I might have gone a little overboard with the butter. Ted followed her, his stomach rumbling at the rich, savory aroma of baked pasta, marinara, and garlic. You really didn't have to do this, Amber. I wanted to, she said, turning to face him. She leaned back against the counter, crossing her arms and looking at him with an expression that was entirely too soft to be casual. Honestly, I felt really bad about how everything went down. I know Brooke and I, well, we talked a lot. But I never wanted things to end like this for you. You didn't deserve to be treated like an afterthought in your own home. Ted blinked. This was a massive departure from the Amber who, just a month ago, had told Brooke in front of him that men who don't aspire to executive roles are essentially just tall children. Well, things happen, Ted said, opting for neutrality. Brooke wanted different things. I just wanted to watch my games and eat my chicken. Amber let out a soft, musical laugh. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that, Ted. A man should be allowed to relax in his own space. Brooke always wanted to change people. She could never just appreciate what she had right in front of her. She stepped closer, reaching out to gently touch the sleeve of his sweatshirt. You're a good man, Ted. Any woman would be lucky to have someone as stable, kind, and grounded as you. Ted looked at her hand on his arm, then looked at the lasagna. Should we eat? He asked. Amber's smile stiffened for a fraction of a second before recovering its warm, glowing quality. Of course. Let me get the plates. As she moved around his kitchen with an ease that felt slightly rehearsed, Ted couldn't help but notice how different the atmosphere was when Brooke was here. The kitchen was a zone of high tension. If a single drop of water splashed onto the granite counter, it was a tragedy. Now, Amber was chatting easily, laughing at his dry jokes, and plating the food like they were old friends who had been doing this for years. But beneath the pleasant aroma of the lasagna, a tiny, quiet voice in the back of Ted's mind, the voice that usually told him when a server script was about to crash, started to whisper. Why now? Brooke sat in the passenger seat of a brand new, charcoal gray Audi Q7, trying very hard to look like a woman who was living her best life. The man behind the wheel was named Julian. He was 34, wore a tailored navy blazer over a crisp white t-shirt, and had a jawline that looked like it had been carved by someone who specialized in luxury goods. He was a portfolio manager, a title Brooke didn't entirely understand but knew sounded incredibly expensive. So, Julian said, his eyes flicking to her briefly before returning to the road. I was thinking we'd hit this new fusion place downtown. It's super exclusive. I had to pull a few favors to get a table at 8. Oh, that sounds wonderful, Brooke said, smiling warmly. I love fusion. Yeah, they do this deconstructed Wagyu taco that's absolutely insane, Julian continued, steering the heavy SUV through the evening traffic. Anyway, as I was saying, the crypto market is in a temporary correction, but my automated trading bots are still pulling in about 4% weekly. It's all about leverage. You know? Most people don't understand risk management. Brooke nodded along, trying to look engaged. In reality, her head was throbbing. She had been on 3 dates since the divorce papers were signed, and every single one of them had felt like a job interview where she was the employer, but the candidate was the one doing all the bragging. Her first date, a real estate broker named Marcus, not Ted's friend, had spent 2 hours explaining why renting was for financial illiterates, while knowing full well that Brooke was currently renting a tiny, overpriced studio apartment because her dad's down payment money was locked up in the house she was trying to sell. Her second date had spent the entire evening checking his hair in the reflection of his wine glass. And now there was Julian, who seemed to view her less as a person and more as an audience member for his one-man show about modern finance. What about you? Julian asked suddenly, though his tone suggested he was only asking out of politeness. What do you do again? Marketing? Yes, I'm a senior account manager at a boutique agency, Brooke said, inflating her title slightly. Cool, Julian said. Nice little creative gig. Must be fun. No real pressure, right? Brooke's smile faltered. Nice little creative gig? She worked 50 hours a week, dealing with demanding clients who treated her like a personal punching bag. When she was with Ted, she would come home exhausted, vent for 45 minutes, and Ted would listen quietly, rub her shoulders, and have a hot bath waiting for her. He never called her work a nice little gig. In fact, he'd always tell her she was the smartest person in her agency and that they were lucky to have her. We have a lot of high-profile clients, Brooke said, her voice dropping a fraction. It's actually very high pressure. Sure, Julian said, clearly not listening. He swung the Audi into the valet lane of a glittering restaurant. All right, we're here. Let's get a drink. I need a scotch after the day I've had. My assistant completely botched my calendar. The dinner was a blur of tiny plates, pretentious descriptions, and Julian's endless monologue about his weekend trips to Miami. When the bill arrived, Julian picked it up, glanced at it, and then set it down. Right in the middle of the table. He looked at Brooke with a cool, casual smile. We can just split this on Venmo, right? I like to keep things clean. Easier for my accountant to track personal expenses. Brooke stared at the bill. The total was $380. Her share would be nearly $200, for 3 tiny bites of raw fish, a single Wagyu taco, and 2 glasses of mediocre white wine that Julian had insisted on ordering for her. Oh, Brooke said, her throat suddenly feeling very dry. Yes, of course. That's fine. She reached into her designer purse, the one Ted had bought her for their last anniversary, which she had insisted on keeping, and pulled out her card. Her bank account was dangerously low. Between the deposit on her new apartment, the movers, and her daily expenses, she was starting to realize just how much of her lifestyle had been quietly funded by Ted's mid-level corporate drone salary. As she entered her PIN, a wave of cold reality washed over her. When she was with Ted, she hadn't paid for a single dinner in 3 years. Even when they went out with Amber and her boyfriends, Ted would quietly slip his card to the waiter beforehand so there wouldn't be any awkwardness at the end of the night. He never bragged about it. He never asked her to Venmo him. He just did it because he thought that's what a husband was supposed to do. Everything okay? Julian asked, already standing up and buttoning his blazer. Yes, Brooke said, forcing a smile. Everything is perfect. But as they walked out to the valet, she felt a profound, aching sense of emptiness. She pulled out her phone and opened her messages. She wanted to text Amber. She needed to vent, to hear her best friend's sharp, comforting voice telling her that Julian was just a stepping stone, that she was a queen who deserved a king. She typed out, just finished dinner with Julian. He made me split a $400 bill. I feel so gross. Are you free to talk? She hit send. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Usually, Amber replied within seconds, especially if it was gossip about a date. But tonight, the screen remained dark. Brooke stared out the window of Julian's Audi as he sped through the city, listening to him talk about his next investment strategy, feeling more alone than she ever had in her entire life. Over the next 2 weeks, Amber became a permanent fixture in Ted's life, though she did it so quietly that he barely noticed the transition. First, it was the lasagna. Then, it was a batch of homemade chicken noodle soup. Because she thought she heard him cough when they spoke on the phone. Then, she noticed that his living room was looking a bit barren, so she brought over a large, beautifully potted snake plant. It cleans the air, Ted, she had said, positioning it in the corner where Brooke's shoe rack used to be. And you don't have to do anything to it. Just water it once a month. It's perfect for you. Ted had to admit, the plant looked nice. It filled the empty space without demanding anything from him. Then came the laundry. Amber had stopped by on a Tuesday evening to drop off some fresh blueberry muffins. While she was waiting for him to make tea, she noticed a basket of unfolded laundry sitting on his armchair. Oh, Ted, you can't just leave your clothes like this, she said, already walking over and picking up a gray t-shirt. They're going to get wrinkled. I don't mind, Ted said, holding the kettle. They're just t-shirts. No, a handsome man should always look sharp, she said, her fingers deftly folding the shirt into a perfect, retail-ready square. Here, let me help. I actually find folding clothes very therapeutic. Ted watched her from the kitchen. She was wearing a soft, oversized sweater that slipped off her shoulder, revealing a delicate lace strap. She was humming a soft tune, her movements graceful and domestic. It was a stark contrast to Brooke. Brooke hated laundry. If Ted left his clothes out for more than an hour, it was treated as a personal insult, an indication that he expected her to be his maid, even though Ted did 90% of the household chores anyway. Brooke's contribution to the domestic sphere had mostly consisted of directing Ted on how to do things the right way. But Amber was just doing it. And she was smiling while she did. There, Amber said, patting the neat stack of clothes. All done. By the way, your dish soap is almost empty again. I noticed it when I washed the muffin tin. I'll grab some on my way over next time. You don't have to keep buying me things, Amber, Ted said, handing her a mug of tea. I like taking care of you, Ted, she said softly, looking up at him through her eyelashes. She took the mug, her fingers brushing against his for a second. Longer than necessary. Honestly, I always thought Brooke was incredibly spoiled. She had a man who would do anything for her, and she just threw it away because she was bored. It broke my heart to watch. Ted felt a slight, uncomfortable shift in his stomach. It was one thing to enjoy free food and clean clothes, but hearing Amber talk about Brooke like this felt off. They had been best friends since college. They had shared secrets, gone on trips, and cried on each other's shoulders. Now, Amber was standing in the apartment Brooke had just vacated, wearing a revealing sweater, folding his laundry, and trash-talking her former best friend. Brooke is just different, Ted said carefully. She has high expectations. Too high, Amber said, her voice dropping to a whisper. She stepped closer to him, the scent of vanilla filling the small space between them. She didn't know how to appreciate a real man, Ted. But some of us do. Before Ted could process that statement, his phone on the counter buzzed loudly. He stepped back, breaking the tension, and picked it up. It was a text from Marcus. Marcus, emergency. Meet me at the pub in 10. Now. Do not make excuses. Ted looked at Amber. Hey, sorry. Marcus needs me. Some work emergency or something. Amber's face tightened with a flash of annoyance so quick that if Ted hadn't been looking directly at her, he would have missed it. But she quickly recovered, her eyes softening into an expression of sweet understanding. Oh, of course. Work comes first, she said, setting her mug down. I should get going anyway. I have some emails to catch up on. But, let me know when you're free this weekend, okay? I was thinking of making a beef stew. It takes 6 hours to simmer, but it's absolutely worth it. Sure, Ted said. I'll let you know. 10 minutes later, Ted walked into the crowded, noisy pub down the street. Marcus was already sitting at a corner table, a half-empty pitcher of IPA in front of him. He looked like a detective who had finally cracked a cold case. Sit, Marcus said, gesturing to the empty stool. Ted sat. What's the emergency? Did the server go down? Worse, Marcus said, leaning across the sticky wooden table. I was at the grocery store on 4th Street about an hour ago. Guess who I ran into? I don't know, Marcus. The mayor? No. Sarah. Ted paused. Sarah was Brooke's other close friend, the quiet one who usually got dragged along to their lunches but rarely spoke. Okay. And, Marcus said, pausing for dramatic effect, Sarah told me that Brooke is miserable. She's been going on dates with these absolute clowns she met on some exclusive app, and she's spending half her paycheck just to keep up appearances. But that's not the headline, Ted. This is the headline. Marcus leaned in even closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Sarah said that last week, she went to get coffee with Brooke. Brooke was crying because she couldn't get a hold of Amber. She said Amber has been so busy lately and keeps dodging her calls. And then Sarah told her she saw Amber's Instagram story from 2 weeks ago. Ted frowned. The lasagna photo? Exactly. Marcus slammed his hand on the table, causing a nearby patron to look over. Sarah recognized your kitchen counter. She knows those gray marble tiles. Because she helped you guys move in 3 years ago. She didn't tell Brooke yet. Because she didn't want to cause a scene, but she told me because she knows I'm your boy. Marcus stared at Ted, his eyes wide. Don't you see what's happening here? Amber didn't just coach Brooke into a divorce because she wanted Brooke to find herself. She coached her into a divorce because she wanted to vacating the premises so she could move in. Ted sat back, the weight of the realization slowly settling into his mind. He recalled the way Amber had looked at him when she dropped off the first lasagna. The way she had dressed. The way she knew his exact food preferences he had only ever mentioned to Brooke. Amber hadn't been listening to Brooke's complaints to comfort her. She had been taking notes. She was building a database of Ted's preferences, his dislikes, his habits. She knew he liked 3-cheese lasagna with crispy edges. She knew he liked his garlic bread extra buttery. She knew he felt suffocated by Brooke's demands, so she played the role of the ultra-supportive, low-maintenance, domestic goddess who just wanted to fold his laundry and bring him soup. It's a hostile takeover, Marcus whispered, his voice full of dark awe. She's treating your life like a distressed asset. She drove the stock price down by ruining your marriage, and now she's buying up the shares on the cheap. Ted stared at his glass of water. He felt a strange mixture of amusement and deep, profound weariness. So, Ted said slowly. The lasagna was a lie. The lasagna was a Trojan horse, Ted. Inside that beautiful, crispy cheese crust was a highly motivated, strategic homewrecker who wants your 90 grand salary, your stable credit score, and your clean living room. Marcus shook his head. And the worst part? Brooke has absolutely no idea. She thinks her best friend is home crying with her, when in reality, her best friend is in her ex-husband's kitchen folding his boxer shorts. Ted looked out the window of the pub. The rain was starting to fall, slicking the pavement under the streetlights. What are you going to do? Marcus asked. Ted thought about it. He thought about the 3 years of constant drama, the endless demands, the way Brooke had looked at him when she threw the papers on the table. He thought about Amber's calculating, sweet smiles, and the way she looked at his kitchen like she was already planning where to put her own furniture. I think, Ted said quietly, I'm going to let this play out. Are you insane? Marcus gasped. You're playing with fire. No, Ted said, a slow, genuine smile spreading across his face. I'm just a guy who wants to see how this script ends. It was a rainy Saturday afternoon, and Brooke was cleaning her apartment. The space was tiny, barely 400 square feet, and smelled faintly of old paint and damp carpets. She had tried to liven it up with some expensive scented candles, but they only succeeded in making the place smell like a wet dog that had been sprayed with cheap perfume. She was sorting through a stack of mail when she found an old envelope from her bank. It was a statement from the joint account she had shared with Ted, which they had officially closed 2 weeks ago. She opened it, expecting to see the final, dismal balance. But as her eyes scanned the columns, she froze. For the last 3 months of their marriage, Ted's personal account had been transferring exactly $1,200 a month into a separate savings account labeled for Brooke's business. Brooke's breath caught. A year ago, she had mentioned to Ted, half-jokingly, over a glass of cheap wine, that she wanted to start her own boutique marketing consulting firm one day. She had complained about how she would never have the capital to do it. Ted had just smiled, kissed her forehead, and told her that she was smart enough to do whatever she wanted. She had forgotten all about the conversation. But Ted hadn't. He had been quietly saving $1,200 a month from his own personal discretionary income, money he could have spent on video games, new clothes, or his car, just to build a nest egg for a dream she had only mentioned once. A heavy, suffocating knot of guilt tightened in her throat. She looked around her tiny, sterile room. She thought about Julian, who had texted her yesterday to ask if she wanted to go to a yacht party, but added that tickets are $150 per person. Let me know if you want me to grab you one. She thought about the other guys she had met, who seemed to view her as a temporary accessory, a free trial, to be used and discarded when the next model came along. And then she thought of Ted. Ted, who had signed away their house and car without a single tear, who had looked at her with nothing but tired, calm acceptance while she screamed at him. Ted, who had been quietly funding her dreams while she was busy listening to Amber tell her that he was a mid-level loser. She pulled out her phone. She needed to talk to Amber. She didn't care if Amber was busy, she was going to drive over to her place and force her to have a glass of wine with her. She dialed Amber's number. It rang 3 times before going to voicemail. Brooke sighed, frustration boiling over. She opened Instagram, planning to send her a direct message. But as she opened the app, her feed refreshed. A post from Sarah popped up near the top. It was a photo of Sarah and some friends at a local cafe, but what caught Brooke's eye was a comment thread at the bottom. Sarah, so good catching up. Friend _ missed you guys. Where was Amber? Sarah, oh, you know Amber. She's busy with her new cooking project, winking face. Brooke frowned. Cooking project? Amber hated cooking. Her kitchen was usually used for storing takeout boxes and storing her expensive wine glasses. Feeling a sudden, sharp prickle of curiosity, Brooke clicked on Amber's profile. Amber hadn't posted anything new on her main grid in a week, but she had a highlighted story icon labeled Foodie. Brooke clicked on it. The stories were a series of photos of various home-cooked meals. Homemade chicken soup. Healing energy for a special someone. Blueberry muffins. Tuesday morning treats. 3-cheese lasagna. Simple joys. Brooke stared at the lasagna photo. The lasagna was in a beautiful, heavy glass dish, the cheese perfectly browned around the edges. But it wasn't the lasagna that made Brooke's heart stop. It was the background. Behind the glass dish, sitting on a gray marble countertop, was a small, slightly chipped blue ceramic mug with a tiny white anchor painted on the side. Brooke's hand began to shake. She knew that mug. She had bought it for Ted during their trip to Cape Cod 3 years ago. It was his absolute favorite mug. He drank his morning coffee out of it every single day. She zoomed in on the photo. The gray marble pattern of the countertop was unmistakable. It had the exact same white, diagonal vein running through the corner, the one she had complained about to the landlord because she thought it looked like a crack. Brooke's mind went entirely blank, her thoughts short-circuiting under the sheer, impossible weight of the realization. This wasn't Amber's kitchen. This was Ted's kitchen. She swiped to the next story. The blueberry muffins. They were sitting on a wooden dining table. Her old dining table. The one she had left behind because it was too heavy to move into her new apartment. And in the corner of the frame, barely visible, was a pair of gray sweatpants. Brooke felt as if she had been plunged into ice water. The advice. The constant, whispering voice in her ear for the last year. Babe, you deserve so much better. Ted is just a mid-level corporate drone. What kind of future do you have with him? Sign the papers, Brooke. Know your worth. It wasn't friendship. It wasn't empowerment. It was a clearing of the field. Amber didn't want Brooke to find a high-value man. She wanted Brooke to vacate the house, the husband, and the stable, comfortable life she had spent 3 years building, so that Amber could step right into her shoes. A hot, furious wave of rage, sharper and more violent than anything she had ever felt before, surged through Brooke's veins. She stood up, her knuckles white as she gripped her phone. She grabbed her car keys from the counter. She didn't even bother to put on makeup or change out of her oversized t-shirt. She was going to Ted's apartment. And she was going to burn everything down. Ted was having a highly productive Saturday. He had successfully configured his home network to bypass a stubborn firewall. His favorite football team was currently winning by 10 points in the third quarter, and his apartment was clean, quiet, and peaceful. The only slight complication was the text he had received from Amber an hour ago. Amber, hey Ted. I have a surprise for you. I'm marching over to your apartment right now with a fresh, hot tray of homemade lasagna. Be ready. Face blowing a kiss. Ted had stared at the text for a long time. He had debated telling her he was busy, but then he remembered the taste of the first lasagna. It really had been spectacular. And honestly, he hadn't eaten lunch yet. So, he had replied, sounds good. Doors open. Now, he sat on the couch, waiting. At exactly 4:15, the doorbell rang. Ted got up, opened the door, and there she was. Amber was wearing a tight, off-the-shoulder red dress that seemed entirely impractical for carrying a heavy, hot baking dish. She was beaming, her makeup immaculate, her hair cascading over her shoulders in perfect, glossy curls. She held the ceramic dish wrapped in a pristine white towel, the steam rising from the sides, filling the hallway with the rich, intoxicating scent of melted cheese, garlic, and slow-simmered beef marinara. Smells incredible, Amber, Ted said, stepping back to let her in. Only the best for my favorite guy, she said, stepping past him with a dramatic sway of her hips. She set the dish down on the dining table, her fingers lingering on the towel as she turned to face him with a sweet, possessive smile. I made sure to add extra cheese on top just the way you like. Before she could finish her sentence, the heavy wooden fire door at the end of the hallway was kicked open with a loud, echoing crash. Both Ted and Amber jumped, turning toward the sound. Brooke stood in the doorway of the hallway, her hair wild from the rain, her chest heaving, her face a deep, furious crimson. She was wearing an oversized gray sweatshirt, faded leggings, and running shoes covered in mud. She looked like a hurricane that had somehow taken human form. She marched down the hallway, her eyes locked onto Amber with a terrifying, predatory intensity. Amber's face instantly drained of all color, her sweet, domestic expression evaporating in a fraction of a second, replaced by sheer, naked panic. Be Brooke? Amber stammered, stepping back until her spine hit the edge of Ted's dining table. What are you doing here? Brooke didn't answer. She stopped 3 feet away from Amber, her breathing ragged, her hands shaking with rage. She looked down at the hot, steaming tray of lasagna sitting on the table, then looked up at Amber's off-the-shoulder red dress. A cooking project, Brooke said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous hiss. A special someone. Simple joys. Amber swallowed hard, her fingers clutching the edge of the table behind her. Brooke, sweetie, it's not what it looks like. Don't you dare call me sweetie, you absolute snake. Brooke screamed, the sound echoing off the walls of the spacious living room. I trusted you. I sat in your apartment and cried on your shoulder for hours while you told me that Ted was a loser who was ruining my life. You practically held my hand and forced me to sign those divorce papers. Brooke, I was just trying to help you. Amber cried, her voice cracking as she tried to salvage the situation. You said you were unhappy. You said you wanted a man who drove a luxury car, who could take you to expensive dinners. And you wanted Ted. Brooke shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at the lasagna. You didn't want to help me find myself. You wanted me to leave so you could take my husband, my apartment, and my life. He's not your husband anymore. Amber suddenly snapped, her sweet, timid persona cracking under the pressure, revealing a cold, defensive sharpness. Underneath. She stood up straighter, crossing her arms. You signed the papers. Brooke. You walked out of that door. You didn't want him, remember? You wanted a high-value man. Well, how are those luxury SUV guys treating you? Are they paying your rent? Are they making you dinner? No. They're making you Venmo them. $40 for a glass of wine. Brooke flinched as if she had been struck. The truth of Amber's words hit her like a physical blow, but it only served to fan the flames of her rage. You calculated this entire thing, Brooke whispered, her eyes rimmed with red. Tears of anger finally spilling over her cheeks. You've been planning this for months. I didn't plan anything, Amber said coldly. But unlike you, I know a good thing when I see it. Ted is stable, he's kind, he's quiet, and he treats a woman right. You treated him like a piece of old furniture that didn't match your aesthetic. You didn't deserve him, Brooke. But I do. Brooke let out a choked, sobbing gasp. She turned her tear-stained face toward Ted, who was standing quietly by the kitchen counter, holding a clean fork. Ted, Brooke pleaded, her voice cracking with raw emotion. Tell me you didn't. No. Tell me you aren't actually letting this monster into our home. Ted looked at Brooke. He looked at her messy hair, her mud-stained shoes, and the genuine, agonizing pain in her eyes. Then he looked at Amber, who was standing tall, looking at him with a gaze that was suddenly very demanding, as if she were waiting for him to step up and defend his new woman. Finally, Ted looked down at the hot, bubbling lasagna. The cheese was perfectly golden brown. The garlic bread smelled heavenly. He took a slow step forward, walked to the table, and quietly picked up the spatula lying next to the baking dish. He sliced a perfect, square piece of lasagna, lifted it onto a clean white plate, and took a small bite with his fork. He chewed slowly, his expression entirely neutral. Both women stared at him, the heavy, screaming silence of the room suddenly hanging on his next words. It's really good, Amber, Ted said, his voice calm and conversational. But honestly, the first batch had a bit more garlic. This one's a little heavy on the oregano. Brooke blinked, her jaw dropping. Ted. Are you seriously eating pasta right now? Well, yeah, Ted said, taking another small bite. It's 4:30. I didn't eat lunch. Your marriage is dead, your best friend betrayed me, and you're critiquing the seasoning? Brooke screamed, her hands flying into the air in utter disbelief. Ted set his plate down with a soft, quiet clink. He looked at both of them, his relaxed, easygoing demeanor slowly fading into something cool, detached, and incredibly steady. Brooke, Ted said quietly. My marriage didn't die today. It died a year ago. When you stopped looking at me like a husband and started looking at me like a financial obstacle. You wanted a luxury life, and you chose to listen to the person who told you exactly what you wanted to hear. That was your choice. Brooke's chest rose and fell rapidly, her lips trembling as she stared at him. The reality of her loss finally crashing down on her in full. Ted then turned his gaze to Amber. Her triumphant, cold smile faltered under his cool, analytical look. And Amber, Ted continued, his voice dropping to a calm, flat register. You're a great cook. Truly. The lasagna is spectacular. But Marcus was right. You didn't bring me food because you cared about me. You brought it because you saw an empty slot in a stable lifestyle and wanted to fill it. You wanted a guy who was low maintenance so you could run the show. But I don't want a show anymore. I just want a quiet room. Amber stared at him, her face turning a soft, embarrassed pink. Ted. I folded your laundry. I bought you a plant. I know, Ted said, pointing to the corner. You can take the snake plant with you. And the baking dish. I'll keep the leftovers, though. Amber's mouth opened, closed, and then her eyes flared with a cold, sharp anger. She snatched her designer purse from the sofa, marched to the table, and grabbed her car keys. You're an idiot, Ted, she spat, her voice dripping with venom. You're going to spend the rest of your life alone in this empty apartment, eating takeout and playing video games like a teenager. That, Ted said with a genuine, peaceful smile, is literally the dream. Amber let out a sharp, disgusted scoff, turned on her heel, and marched out of the apartment, her high heels clicking furiously against the hardwood floor. Before she slammed the heavy front door behind her. The silence that followed was heavy, thick, and absolute. Brooke stood in the center of the living room, her shoulders slumped, her eyes fixed on the floor. The rage had drained out of her, leaving behind nothing but A cold, hollow shell of exhaustion and regret. She looked at Ted. He looked so comfortable, so entirely at peace in his own skin. He didn't look like a man who had just lost his wife or his friend. He looked like a man who had finally solved a difficult puzzle and was ready to close the book. Ted, Brooke whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the refrigerator. I'm so sorry. I was so stupid. Ted sighed, a soft, gentle sound. He walked over to her, stopping a polite distance away. He didn't reach out to touch her. The physical boundary between them was invisible, but it was as solid as a brick wall. You weren't stupid, Brooke, he said softly. You just wanted things I couldn't give you. And that's fine. But you can't come back here looking for the comfort of the old life when you threw it away for the promise of a new one. I don't have a new one, she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. It's so hard, Ted. Everyone is so mean. Nobody cares about me. They just want a free trial. I know, Ted said, his voice full of quiet, gentle pity. The world is tough out there. But you wanted to find your worth. Now you have to do it on your own. He walked to the front door, opened it, and stood by the frame, waiting. Brooke looked at him for a long, agonizing moment. She saw the quiet determination in his eyes, the absolute lack of anger or resentment. He didn't hate her. He didn't want revenge. He just wanted her to leave. She wiped her tears with the back of her sleeve, took a deep, shaky breath, and walked toward the door. As she stepped past him into the hallway, she paused, looking at his profile one last time. Do you think you'll ever forgive me? She asked. Ted smiled, a small, genuine expression of warmth. I already have, Brooke. That's why I signed the papers. She nodded slowly, her throat tight, and walked down the hallway. Ted closed the door. The lock clicked into place with a solid, satisfying sound. He walked back into the living room, picked up his plate of lasagna, and sat down on the sofa. He picked up the TV remote, pressed the power button, and the sports channel flared to life just as his team scored another touchdown. He took a bite of the lasagna. It really was excellent. His phone buzzed on the coffee table. Marcus, status update. Are you dead? Did she poison the cheese? Ted picked up the phone, took a photo of his clean, quiet living room with the game playing on the screen, and sent it. Ted, the snake plant is gone. The lasagna is in my fridge. The remote is in my hand. Marcus, my God. You actually did it. You survived the hostile takeover. Ted, it wasn't a takeover, Marcus. It was just a temporary system error. Everything is back online now. Ted tossed his phone aside, leaned back into the deep, comfortable cushions of the sofa, and took another bite of his food. The apartment was quiet. The air was clear. He had sole custody of the TV remote, a full bank account, and a fridge full of lasagna. He had never been happier in his entire life.